Hi, my name's Daria Merritt. I attended the Mental Health, Suicide, and Supporting LGBTQIA Youth and Young Adults an open panel discussion that was offered at UNCW main campus on January 30th. I'm just going to kind of dive right into it. What does LGBTQIA mean? At the panel, it was stated that it means lesbian, gay, bi, transitioning, questioning, intersex, and asexual. The panel was formed of several speakers. They would all open their speeches up with "I identify as." Some of them said lesbian, queer, gay, dyke, she. Two new ones that I had not heard before were cisgender. And cisgender is an identity or performance in a gender role that society deems to match the person's assigned sex at birth. Another one was self-denial. And self-denial is something that I'm about to go into now. Cultural sensitivity. This is something that the audience and I got to experience at the expense of one of the speakers, but it was a really good experience, and it was a learning experience for sure. There was a guest speaker, Tori Eaton, who opened up his statement with, "I identify as a self-denial." He stated that he has feminine parts, very, very feminine parts to be exact. He had very large breasts, and that's something that he stated that I feel more feminine some days. And it's hard for me to identify as a male because of the way I'm built. But he did state that he identified mostly as male, but because of the confusing days, that self-denial is a term that fits him better than anything. After Tori shared his life experiences, the panel opened up for questions, and a guest speaker from NAMI surprisingly stood up and said, "This question is directed to the lady in pink." Tori was wearing pink, but he immediately stood up and said, "I do not identify as a lady, as a woman." At that moment, the audience was in complete shock. I don't know if it was because he just asked that or because of her response and no one really caught that he called him a she instead of a male. It is very, very important that we pay attention to our clients, to the people around us, our peers. Details are very important. And it's important that we familiarize ourselves and educate ourselves with the common terms and languages, because it can be more damaging and more harmful if we don't do these things. And another thing is, it's important to be neutral and non-judgmental, especially within this population. They already are under a great deal of scrutiny in our society because of their life choices. Another thing that really stood out to me is the spiritual side of this population. I am from southern Louisiana, so this population isn't accepted, isn't talked about. You just don't go to church, and it's very hard to be a member of this population and live where I call home. Some common things that we hear in our Christian religion is that God does not make mistakes. God is not the art of confusion, and God is perfect. That is something I heard growing up my entire life. But something else I also heard was gays are mistakes. You are wrong if you're gay. You're committing a sin, and God does not like that. He does not like what you're doing. It's very hurtful things. One of the guest speakers at the panel was Reverend Cheryl Walker. And Ms. Walker identified herself as a cisgender lesbian woman. She made a statement that just lit a fire in me. She stated that God does not make mistakes. We are taught that. It says it in the Bible, that God does not make mistakes. So for someone to say that you are a mistake because you're gay or you're lesbian or you're queer is saying that God made a mistake. But we are taught that God does not make mistakes. After hearing that changed so much in my life and what I've heard. And it's definitely opened up a new side for me. I would have never, ever said that I want to work with the LGBTQIA group in a spiritual setting. I grew up very religious, and changing my beliefs is a little uncomfortable for me. But this is something that I feel very strong in. And I've followed what Reverend Walker was saying. She also gave out some guidelines on how to be able to be spiritual and have your religion and still be in this population. And I thought it was really interesting because you can't just go up to a church and say, are you accepting of gays? Are you accepting of lesbians? Things like that. Reverend Walker stated that you can look on the signs of churches, and some of them will say opening and affirming or welcoming congregation, safe place for the LGBTQIA group. One of the most important things is, and I found this very, very interesting, is to not ask the pastor first. Do not talk to the pastor first if he or she is welcoming of this population. Because they will say, oh, we're welcoming of everyone, but then you get in there and they're preaching against the population. She stated that it's very helpful if you call the church and just speak to the first person who answers the phone, as long as it's not the pastor, and ask them. Because if they don't know the answer, then they're probably not accepting. And that's what I took away from the seminar.